Greetings, fellow time travelers. Welcome back to Secrets of the Ancients, where we uncover the hidden mysteries of lost civilizations and dive deep into the secrets that shaped our world. I'm your archaeological guide, ready to take you on another mind-bending journey through the crustáceos. Called the Dari Powers on Bar Wooddobbers and Saman, Territories Ebeditanbers. Today's discovery will challenge everything you thought you knew about ancient history. Before we unveil these incredible secrets, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss the ancient mysteries we're about to reveal. Human beings invest enormous amounts of time and money exploring the unknown, first space, then the ocean depths, but there remains another frontier to conquer. Scientists call it the deep frontier. I'm talking about the deepest point we've ever reached on our journey toward Earth's core. In the 1960s, we attempted to drill the deepest hole ever made on Earth. This led us far into the Arctic Circle. What is now called the Kola Superdeep Borehole is also the lowest artificial point on the planet at 12,262 meters deep. It took 20 years to drill this deep into Earth's crust, and researchers estimate we only reached about 1/3 of the distance separating us from the mantle. Here's what our planet looks like. If Earth were like an onion, the Earth's crust is like the thick skin of that onion. This part is only 40 kilometers thick. Beyond that lies the mantle, 2,900 kilometers deep. And after that, right in the center of Earth, we have the core, which is composed of two layers, an inner layer and an outer layer. Do you know where the thinnest crust on the planet is located? At the bottom of the ocean. When American scientists understood this, they began drilling holes in the ocean floor. This is how Project Mohole was born. It began in 1961, but the technology we had at the time for drilling deep holes in the ocean was very rudimentary. They had to improvise. They installed a thruster system on the sides of their drilling ship to stabilize it above the hole. The main challenge was drilling as vertically as possible. Otherwise, this deep hole would have resembled a labyrinth. Both the Kola Superdeep Borehole project and Project Mohole were officially abandoned in the following years. However, humans have built relatively deep underground structures. In 1963, a Turkish man doing renovations in his basement discovered a tunnel. The entrance to this tunnel led to other passages that formed an entire network of halls and chambers. He didn't know it, but he had just discovered Derinkuyu. This lost city measured nearly 18 stories or 61 meters deep. It was large enough to accommodate 20,000 people and was located right under Cappadocia in Turkey. Cappadocia is home to hundreds of underground dwellings. 40 of these underground cities have at least 2 stories. However, none are as large as Derinkuyu. There aren't many historical accounts about the origins of Derinkuyu. Some think the oldest part of the complex was dug around 2000 BC by the Hittites. The Hittites were an Indo-European civilization. They were one of the first major civilizations of the Bronze Age in Western Asia. Researchers think they built this underground city to protect themselves from invasions. Others think it was actually Christians who built this city during the early centuries of our era. According to them, it would have been built to protect inhabitants from extreme temperature variations, intense heat in summer, and freezing cold in winter. From a geological perspective, the terrain under Cappadocia is ideal for construction. The rocks are soft, which facilitates tunnel drilling. For this same reason, large underground cavities are fragile. That's why most rooms are supported by pillars. Fortunately, none of Derinkuyu's ceilings have ever collapsed. The builders of Derinkuyu had thought of everything. The city was isolated from the world by enormous boulders that concealed its entrance. It was ventilated by more than 15,000 ventilation shafts about 10 centimeters wide. This guaranteed sufficient ventilation in the upper levels, which ended up being used as living rooms and bedrooms. The lower levels of this impressive labyrinth mainly served for storage, but truly, nothing was missing. A room for a wine press, for domestic animals, small religious buildings. They certainly spared no effort to make this underground city as complete as a city built on the surface. Speaking of impressive underground structures, Switzerland has the longest tunnel in the world. It is located in the St. Gotthard Massif. This impressively sized tunnel was built more than 2,440 meters below the surface. The idea for its construction was proposed as early as 1947, but work didn't officially begin until 1999. It took years to approve the project, then find the ideal location. Despite this, The 73 different types of rocks that make up the massif made this construction a real challenge. Some rocks were as hard as granite, others as soft as shale. Therefore, different approaches had to be adopted and different equipment used so that the whole thing wouldn't collapse. In total, about 28 million tons of rock had to be excavated to allow for the tunnel's development. A construction site at such an underground depth posed many challenges. The deeper the workers went into the mountain, the higher the temperature rose. In the absence of natural ventilation, the temperature could climb up to 46 degrees Celsius, making working conditions very difficult. The tunnel extends 56 kilometers from one end to the other. During construction, 4 huge tunnel boring machines, also called moles, had to be used to pierce the massif. Each of these moles measured about 426 meters long, but it was one of the best solutions because these machines limit disturbances to the surrounding soil and allow for smooth walls. Did you know that the deepest basement in the world is located under the Sydney Opera House in Australia? The building goes as deep underground as it rises above the ground, but this basement doesn't only serve as a foundation for the Opera House, it's actually a parking garage. This unique parking garage goes 36 meters underground, or 12 stories deep, whereas parking garages generally only have 4 or 5 stories. But that's not all that makes it unique. Indeed, if they had decided to build a classic rectangular parking garage, they would have lost a multitude of parking spaces. Since they wanted to optimize the available space, they had to imagine an exceptional structure. First, they dug an artificial cavern to make this dream possible. Then, they had to design a plan. This is how the idea of a donut-shaped basement was born, or what engineers call a double helix. This design surprised the engineering community with its innovative approach. However, it worked. Today there's room for more than 1,000 cars, which seems quite appropriate for an opera house. Let's amaze ourselves once again. It takes up to 1 hour to reach certain underground structures. Take the example of the Mponeng gold mine in South Africa, located about 4 kilometers below the surface. You're probably thinking to yourself, it's only 4 small kilometers. Why does it take 1 hour to get there? But the conditions there are extremely difficult. Yet Milan Ludena, an Ecuadorian runner, managed to run a half marathon in these conditions despite a temperature of 40 degrees Celsius, a humidity rate of 80%, and an atmospheric pressure of 1.4. That's the pressure you feel at 5 meters under the sea. Incredible. Imagine yourself walking across a desert. It's hot, you're terribly thirsty, and to top it all off, you have to go around this wall. A wall in the middle of an arid and lifeless desert. Exactly, a wall in the northern Saudi desert. Archaeologists have just made an extraordinary discovery. And it's not just a simple wall, no, it's an entire fortified ancient city that could date from the year 2400 BC. They think this place housed about 500 people, and may have been inhabited for a millennium. This is a major discovery because it means this region was perhaps much more advanced than previously thought. The city was well organized with different residential areas, towers, and solid walls to protect the inhabitants, as well as different sections for all kinds of daily activities. This ancient city that we call Al-Natah today was an oasis city, and thanks to it, we have a glimpse of what life was like in this desert thousands of years ago. Apparently the different zones were well separated. There were residential districts, a cemetery, agricultural lands, and even a downtown area. This oasis city located in the Khaybar region constitutes the first large organized settlement from the 2nd or 3rd millennium BC discovered by researchers in northwestern Arabia. Initial studies show us that this city, which extended over about 24,300 square meters, included several districts including a residential quarter, a cemetery, and a judicial quarter with courts. The houses were arranged in well-ordered rows, all connected by small roads. These streets separated the residential quarter from the rest of the city. At the time, most inhabitants of this region were nomadic herders in perpetual movement. However, archaeologists are convinced that during the Bronze Age, northwestern Arabia was dotted with small, fortified cities and oases. Oasis networks. These interconnected oasis cities were unique. They offered populations the security necessary to live, store goods, and trade. They testify to the beginnings of urbanism, and suggest to us that it was at this time that people began to settle down and organize their community in a more structured way. The research team estimates there were about 50 houses in Al-Natah. However, this number could reach 70 as excavations advance. It's thought that a few hundred people lived there. One of the most remarkable aspects is undoubtedly that some houses had up to 3 stories. Built on a slope near 2 important trade routes, this city benefited from a privileged location. One of the most impressive aspects of this place is its water supply. The oasis had springs and aquifers, underground water sources, which made it an ideal place for agriculture. Thanks to these water reserves, inhabitants could grow their own food and be relatively autonomous. Underwater treasures. The surrounding walls probably served to control access to the city and its resources. This sedentary lifestyle constituted an impressive change compared to the nomadic existence of previous populations. This was the beginning of an agro-pastoral lifestyle, a mixture of agriculture and livestock. This theory is corroborated by the discovery inside the city of a whole set of tools, millstones, mortars and pestles. The inhabitants ground their grains to prepare their meals. They fed on grains, meat, and milk from their own livestock. These fascinating discoveries show us that people could provide for their needs and that they were surprisingly advanced for the time. Thanks to better access to Saudi Arabia over the past 2 decades, archaeologists now have a much more precise picture of life there thousands of years ago. Al-Natah was perhaps even part of a network of similar fortified oases